Welcome to After the Tower, a podcast about change and transformation. My name's Toland and I'm your host, and I'm happy to be with you here in this moment. So we have a special episode this week. I have on Kelsey Tortorice, who is been a teacher of mine for a long time and was incredibly instrumental in making this podcast a reality. Working with Kelsey for a period of like a couple weeks. I can't remember the exact timeline. That intensive work we did together helped me break through some blocks, which led me to come up with this idea. And Kelsey's been such an amazing supporter of the podcast and of me doing this project. And I've just been so grateful to have had that support. And I always hoped and wanted to have Kelsey on the podcast. And finally, it was the right time to have a conversation. And it was really lovely to be able to do that and to hold space for Kelsey in that way. And we get into some of the tower moments that Kelsey has gone through as it relates to career, specifically the transition from being a music teacher at a high school to becoming a solo spiritual entrepreneur, and kind of all the various moments in between where these changes were made. And Kelsey's so honest and has so much awareness into their process and how things work that it was really a wonderful thing to get to witness and to understand better. And it's always great just hearing someone's story like condensed like that. I've heard the pieces throughout our time together, and it was just nice to hear it all together at once. And so it's a sweet conversation, and I really am grateful to Kelsey for making the space and being vulnerable and sharing. So we should probably get to it. So Kelsey is a post-capitalist astrologer, teacher, human design experimenter, and community initiator. Kelsey is a 5/2 emotional manifestor, Sagittarius rising, Aries sun, Sagittarius moon. Kelsey has several podcasts that you should definitely check out. Maya Games, Lab Partners, and then Kelsey also has like an amazing free resource for those who are interested in learning about human design called the Living Your Design podcast, which basically for free provides Kelsey's whole all the lectures from Kelsey's Living Your Design course. And it can be a great way to learn about human design from the beginning if you're curious about it. But also definitely check out Kelsey's Patreon. It's an amazing space for classes, workshops, all sorts of extra opportunities to learn more about all these esoteric ideas, and lots of cool people in those spaces. So just check it all out. And for me, tolandlawrence.com for all of the services that I provide, coaching, human design readings, tarot, whatever you want. And follow the podcast and subscribe. I haven't said that yet, but I don't know. Apparently it helps. I have no idea. But if you're in the mood to do that, or write a review or something, I would be very happy. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. All right. Hi, Kelsey. How are you?
Hi, Toland. I'm well.
It's such a delight to have you on After the Tower. I'm so excited to have this conversation.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as we've discussed on your podcast, you were so instrumental in me actually making this a thing and working with you, obviously made it happen. And so it's just I always hoped and wanted for us to have a conversation on here. So I'm really delighted to this chance.
Thanks for inviting me. After the Tower is one of the only podcasts I listened to in 2025. So
well,
I'm like podcast supporter in multiple ways, including the work we did to help you get it going, but also I'm a fangirl. This is my pod I listen to. So,
well, happy to have a fan on the podcast. And obviously, I've worked with you for such a long time, and it's been such an enriching experience being in relationship with you. And so I'm excited to dig into your story today. So I mean, there's tons we could talk about, and as you talk about a lot, you in human design, you're on the left angle cross of upheaval. I mean, upheaval is part of your life, and being in your container, I experienced that in the Venus fan. Like, I think about like I joined the Venus fan, and a month later, I did ayahuasca, which like totally shook up my life, and that this was that thing that was holding me through a complete identity transformation. But upheaval is a part of your life as well. And I think when we were talking about what aspect of your life and your story that you want to tell, I think that what I felt most drawn to and what you felt most drawn to is this identity, this huge change, this kind of constant process of change that you've been going through in your career for, the way we contextualized it was the Uranus and Taurus transit through your sixth house. But, that's about since 2017, 16. I mean, 2016 Uranus wasn't in Taurus, but that's how long
Yeah.
this transition has been going on. And, back then you were a teacher, you were a music teacher, and now you are something completely different. And so you are, all the things that you are. And
Upheaval.
I wanted to speak, but then I'm like, I don't know how you would define yourself. I
So
know
don't
how
know
I
how
see
I
you.
would define myself. So
So I was like, I'm not going to even go there. Just go to kelseyrosestore.com and
yeah, see
see
what
what's there.
what words I last chose.
Exactly.
Which I mean, case in point, that's what we're talking about
Right.
in large part.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So I think that I want to start at the beginning. So what drew you to teaching? What like was your experience like as a teacher? What did you get out of it? What did you feel like it provided you at that period of time before things started to change?
Hmm. What drew me to teaching? I don't know why that feels like hard to answer. I feel like the conscious decision might have been less about teaching when I decided to go into music education and more about music and choir and community actually because the I was in like my school choirs and stuff. I was a choir kid in high school, but more significant a component of my childhood was that I was in this youth choir in Cleveland where I grew up called the Singing Angels, and I joined it when I was 8, and I was in it till I graduated high school. Those are like the ages you could join when you're 8, you leave when you graduate high school. So a decade of my childhood, more than half of my legal childhood, I was in this group called the Singing Angels. Have I ever told you about this, Tolan?
Yeah, no, you told me about
Okay.
this.
Yeah. It's like such a core component of my life that these days when I realize I'm like close with people who don't know, I'm like, oh wait, you need to know about this. But yeah, it was like my whole life. As a kid, all my best friends were from that group. We were from all across like the Cleveland metropolitan area. So it was very expansive as I think about it now. It was like a very expansive opportunity because I wasn't just I was exposed to people from communities different than the one I was growing up in locally and outside of what I would have been exposed to otherwise. And not even just exposed to, but like close with. Like my best friends were from all over, very different demographics, very different income levels, and music. Like it sounds so cheesy. The motto of that choir was make music, make friends, make a difference. But my participation in that choir and like all the friendships that came from it, the relationships that came from it were the entire like gel and glue of my childhood. It was so much of my identity was being a part of that group. It was like, depending on the time of year, we would meet from 1 to 4 times a week.
Mm.
And I went to Europe with this group and I traveled all over America with this group. And I had this like, I'm like, yeah, I haven't talked about it in a while. So like circling back to it, I'm like circling back to it with new awareness and seeing patterns and things from then. But I had this like, it's feeling very Aquarian in this moment. I had this orientation of like, I didn't have to invest in my normal life because I had
Mm.
this other thing that was more special. I'm really feeling into like Aquarius on my third, Leo in my ninth right now. The way I was talking about it being like expansive and like that's where I really shined, Leo. That
Mm.
was a very central component of my life, and it made it so that my everyday experiences at school and in my neighborhood, I had this sense of like I'm different from this. I don't need to be involved here. So never really seen it through that axis before, but it's seeming really clear in this moment. But yeah, it was like my whole life. All of this to say, all my besties were from there. Even now, the people that I stay connected to from my childhood are Singing Angels people, not really people from my high school and my community. And so when I graduated, I remember I was not going into like I didn't audition for music schools at all my junior and senior year. There was something just really intuitive, instinctive in me that was like, I'm going to DePaul University in Chicago and I'm not studying music. I don't want to study music. There was like this moment, long moment at the end of my senior year that was just like, I wanted to do something different. I think there was something where I was like, I needed to test the part of my identity that was so centralized around choir that I
Mm.
was like, I'd be very curious now to go back and see like what house perfected year I was in and transits and stuff. Cause there was just, yeah, a sensation of like, I needed to experience something different. So I moved to Chicago. I went to DePaul. I didn't have a major. And that was such an expansive year for me in another way, like having the opportunity to try on a new identity that wasn't connected to all these things that I did was so fun. And yeah, I felt like I remember feeling like a completely different person that year. And then at some point in that year, I realized how much I missed choir. And I realized that this is like a huge core component of me, like singing in choirs with people, being a musician, being a singer, the collaborative component of like working on something together and harmonizing and all of that was like I missed it so much. And so I was like, all right. And I think like I had like dabbled in different classes or thoughts of different majors. And I just at some point in that freshman year of school was like, no, I want music. I need to go back to music. I miss it. It is a core part of me and I don't want to let go of it. And I auditioned for the music school at DePaul, which is like really hard to get into. And I didn't get into it. And I was like, okay, I love Chicago. I love my new community here. I don't want to leave. I have to find another way to be a music teacher in Chicago. And I found this weird ass little school called Vandercook College of Music, where at the time that I went, there were 140 undergrad.
Wow.
And it was a single little building on another college's campus, on IIT's campus in Chicago. IIT, not to be confused with ITT, which a lot of people know about from commercials. IIT is like a pretty like high quality technology school in Chicago on the south side of Chicago. And Vandercook was just this like one little building that existed on their campus so that they could utilize resources from that college, but it's all music education majors. So it was kind of like band camp college. 140 undergrads, probably like two-thirds or maybe just over half were like band nerds. And then you
Hmm.
had your choir kids and then you had your orchestra kids. But the band program was the biggest one. And everybody who went to that school got certified in K through 12 general music. So we all had to learn to teach like elementary, middle school, and then high school band choir orchestra. So another really like expansive
Right.
experience for me because I never did band in high school. I played piano, I knew a little bit of guitar. I could read music and stuff, but like I was a choir kid. I was a singer. And then when I went to Vandercook, I had to learn every band instrument, every orchestra instrument because I was going to be certified to teach all these things.
Wow. So you had to actually like learn to play all these
Yeah,
instruments.
like to an elementary level essentially.
Right.
Like I had they It's fun thinking about this. It's been so long. You had to be in band for, I think, a year or a year and a half, and orchestra for a year. And then, like, obviously, the band and orchestra kids had to be in choir. So we all had to, like, learn each other's disciplines. And so I had to, like, learn every woodwind, every brass, but, like, to play scales and, like, basic songs. But then I had to learn viola and clarinet because literally my first week there, I had never touched a band instrument. They give me a clarinet case. Nobody teaches me how to put it together. And
Oh
they sit me
gosh.
in the third row of the clarinet section and they're just like, go. And I have a funny anecdote about this. Were you in band?
No, no. I
Okay.
played the viola for 2 years and then I quit. I couldn't read music. I don't know. Reading music didn't work for me. I
Okay.
couldn't.
Interesting. Well, so the clarinet's a reed instrument. And I don't know, I have to like think about how it works. The reed is supposed to face it's supposed to face down when you put
Hmm.
it. Is that right? Or is it supposed to face up? Either way, I put it in the wrong way.
Oh no.
And so, like, in my first, again, nobody taught me how to assemble. I'm literally watching the people next to me to try to figure out how to put the clarinet together. They're also choir kids because they put all the choir kids in the third row of the clarinet section and they're like, figure it out. But some of them knew. I think some of them actually played clarinet. And then I put the reed the opposite way of how it's supposed to face. I must have had it face up and it's supposed to be face down. And the band director, just like in front of the whole fucking school, which is in the band, is like, you there in the third row, your reed's upside down. And of course, that's like hilarious to all these band kids, but I have no idea. So,
Right.
anyways, I don't know. I'll trust that that will somehow metaphorically connect to themes we talk about today.
I
But yes,
mean,
so
in that
yeah,
moment,
go
did
ahead.
you feel like embarrassed? Or you were like, what the
Oh,
fuck am I
yeah,
supposed to do? Like, I didn't
for
know.
sure. I felt embarrassed. I think I felt like a little angry, but I think I was like confident enough and lighthearted enough about it to be like, okay, like what? I've never been in band. What do you like?
Right.
Tell, like, show me. Somebody show me. So yeah, so yeah, I went to Vandercook. I ended up graduating from there. And to come back to your original question, yeah, I think like it was music. It was
It was
like
music.
it was music and the choir, like which you can probably see observing like even where I am right now and the way I'm kind of returning from a solo act to wanting to collaborate more with
Yeah.
people in the work I do now. Like my 3740, like being a part of a whole. Like I want to harmonize with a group. I want to create something together.
Yeah.
And that has been a part of my like DNA
Hmm.
for my whole life. And music was just the first like medium through which I did that. I also, when I started to really get into my spiritual practices, yoga, meditation, I also realized retrospectively that like sight reading,
Hmm.
playing pianos, vocalizing, but especially sight reading was my first mode of meditation. Like it's very
Mm,
meditative to just like watch notes go by and make your body get in sync with them the way you play or the way you sing and the way it uses your mind and body and breath all together. So
totally.
meditative,
Never
right?
thought
So
about that before, but that is so true.
yeah, and then like the way that I talk about astrology and human design in my work now as these like ways of harmonizing with each other and with the whole and each of our bodies as an individual instrument, right? Like it to me it feels like I just kind of shifted the like language and it's more than just the language, but like I used to say music was my first frequency language.
Hmm.
And I do feel I can see kind of a through line to the way I work with these systems and music. But yeah, it was about music, but I also think there's something really inherent to me about wanting to like share what I've
Right.
learned very immediately when I've learned it. And so at that point, music was like my primary nameable skill, like discernible skill that I could see. Maybe there's some second line stuff here, like it was clear to me that what I did with music and what I knew with music and my talent with music was distinct from the general public. Like I knew it was something special
Hmm.
or valuable that I could do. And so that when I was trying to think, all right, what career path do I want? That was just like the obvious choice because I was like, I do this with people, I can teach it, right? Like it was just obvious. So there's my,
Right. There's that naturalness coming in.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I really appreciate what you said because obviously I know you and I've experienced you as a teacher. So that's obviously what I think of you as, and that is what you are. And also, but I think it's just cool to, and you've told me about the choir, but music and this being part of a whole and this like this energy that you experienced throughout your childhood of being connected to this like vibrant community where you harmonize together. Like that was the heart, that was the light guiding you towards music
Mhm.
education more than I want to help children in this specific way.
I didn't give a fuck about children, to be honest.
Which is so tell me about that. So you
Yeah.
have this like amazing experience of you get to learn and expand and grow like any Sagittarius
Yeah.
type person would want. And then you enter into an institution
Hmm.
and you have a specific role. But you do create, I mean, I think the classroom is a community, in a
Yeah.
sense. But I'm curious what that felt like to you, what that kind of jump
Yeah.
was like.
There's something really potent right now that's like a little bit of an aside, but I have to go there for a second, which is thinking about my seventh house, where my Mars and my Jupiter lie, which are my chart ruler, because I'm a Sag rising. Jupiter is the ruler of that. And then I have an Aries stellium, including my sun, and Mars is the ruler of that. So, so much of me is influenced by, comes down to my experience of the seventh house. And the seventh house is lots of things, but in the way I'm thinking about it right now, I'm thinking about very like horizontal peership. And I have always felt most interested in, most drawn to, most excited about Mars Jupiter shit, guiding, teaching, relating to people with whom I'm peers.
Mm.
And so singing angels, I was like a leader in there. I was like, what were we called? We were called like there was some kind of title I had for being like one of the student choreographer. I was like a student leader in
Mm-hmm.
singing angels in many ways. Same in my high school choir. I was a student leader. Like I would lead the sectional practices. In Vandercook, it was easy to also be that because we're all peers learning to teach. So we were teaching each other. And I also had like positions. Oh my God, this is like such a fruitful reflection for me in this particular moment. I'm gonna try not to go too far in that direction, but the way it all ties together is so beautiful.
No, go. Just go. Just go
Well, I
for it.
don't, well,
I'll
they're
pull it back if I need to pull it
okay.
back.
It's just like there's like fresh sparkles that are not yet integrated that I'm just excited to continue
Mm-hmm.
to think about beyond this convo. But yeah, I've always been really drawn to teaching and guiding peers.
Mm.
And so when I first started teaching, that's what I was a student teacher first, right? That's what you start with. And then I was 22 years old, I think, teaching like 14 to 17-year olds, which like obviously not my peers, but our minds, our brains weren't like that far away from how we like thought.
Mm.
Like there was a relatability there that I really benefited from and enjoyed in teaching teenagers when I was 22.
Mm-hmm.
And then I became less and less of their peer. I became less and less interested in them because I could
Mm.
relate to them less, right? And this simultaneously, I'm not aware yet that I'm a non-sacral, but retrospectively, I can look back and see I loved the beginning of teaching because I was initiating this choir program and I was like making it my own. And it was my first time doing all this stuff. And it just had, there was like so much energy to start. And my first year in the classroom was my best year, which is so different from what anyone ever tells you teaching
Right.
is like. Like people tell you you're going to suffer through the first year, but I had so much fun. And I was working like 60, 70-hour weeks, but I loved it because I'm a manifestor, you know? So I had
Right.
the energy to start. And then the second year was still pretty good, but I do have a distinct memory of this feeling of like, oh, I'm just going to wait, I just do that all again, but with new kids who I can relate to less. And yeah, there was like that first class. Since I taught choir, I taught kids like all the way through their high school experience. And that first class, they were the class of 2016. So I guess that means I started in the school year of 11, 12, right? Yeah, they were the class of 2016. And like, I still look at that set of kids who started high school and started their high school choir experience with me as like, I had a completely different relationship to them than I had to any other kids that I worked with in this period of my life. Cause there was something about like, we are in this together. And even though they weren't my peers, that we were starting
Yeah.
this experience together was like really special. And then every year from that, new kids coming in, it just like it felt a little less potent. I felt a little less connected to them. My initiatory energy wasn't in it the way that it was the first time. And so every year there was like a significant decrease in my body's energetic buy-in to the work. Simultaneously, I'm like I worked in a charter school, so I don't know how universal knowledge is about this stuff, but in Chicago it's very political situation where the charters there's this like very like white savior complex sort of persona to charter schools where they're I mean, a charter school advocate would obviously talk about this very differently than I am. I'm not a charter school advocate, so biased, subjective take on it, but they take funding away from public schools. They emphasize test scores and they like get a combination of private sector funding who then have power in educational decision making. They then position themselves as look how much better our results are for these in their words, like under-resourced kids in the city. And then they like, anyways, so it's political shit. I'm 22. I'm already pretty fucking radicalized politically at this point, and I'm seeing the problems that I've just kind of given a surface level explanation of. I'm seeing institutionally that this like school that I work for, this network that I work for, and getting even bigger, this institution of education that I'm a part of is not, it doesn't work. The power is fucked. I have power view. I'm seeing my impact. Like I even remember using the word impact when I was reflecting on what I didn't like about working long before I understood the concept of impact as a manifestor in human design. Like I could see how little impact I was able to have in that position. And I could see, yeah, just like all these problems with education that were really stunting my ability to express, teach, guide in the way that I wanted to. And I really saw a lot of my insignificance in a disempowering way. And so it was a combination of like the peer thing and feeling like less and less connected to the kids and the non-sacral thing and like just starting to feel way less able to get it up to do the job. Like it was like I loved it the first year. Like I went to school so happy to teach. I was like a cartoon character choir teacher.
Mm.
Like so much energy. I got every kid at that school had to take music. So like 50% were in band as freshmen, 50% were in choir. Obviously, not obviously, but most of the boys wanted to be in band, but half of them had to be in choir. So I was like working with ninth grade boys that didn't want to sing, and my job
Mm.
was to like get them to do it. And I loved that challenge. Like I had so much fun with it, but then I couldn't do it anymore. So yeah, it was like super satisfying, super fun at first. And then these are like the three things I just talked about are kind of like the three things that my mind is able to assess about why it stopped feeling good. But I don't remember what year it was. It must have been like the summer before my last school year. So it would have been like 5 or 6 years into classroom teaching. I remember I have like a really clear memory of sitting on my couch with Budway in our apartment in Chicago and just I can't remember exactly what it was I expressed, but I think it was one of those things that I had been like thinking for a long time and afraid to acknowledge because of how much it meant. And I finally like relaxed and told him this feeling I was having about it would have had to do with like my identity and teaching choir and not knowing who I am if I'm not a choir teacher. Because I remember the thing he said to me was like so simple, but he said, Kelsey, you're still you, even if you're not a choir
Mm.
teacher. And that was like so permission giving. And that moment was when I started to see the truth in that actually. And I couldn't see the truth in that up to this point. So I mean, I talk about the distinction between year one and two, and then I was full time in the classroom I wrote it down when we were talking earlier, I guess 7 years, including my student teacher year. So that means I spent 6 years like aware that this was a
Mm.
drain and it wasn't working, but and kind of honestly like suffering through it to a gradient extent. Like there were still moments of joy and fun, but mostly the joy and fun and peace like really disintegrated after year one.
And you feel like a big part of why you stayed in it was you just didn't know who you'd be without it, or you didn't know what would come next, or what was, I mean, as you say, that conversation kind of opened that door. But
Well, that
yeah,
conversation like yanked the door open because that's when I was like, okay, this is going to be my last year.
yeah.
I think it was, but why did I stay?
Yeah, I think just like, yeah, why did you stay? And then simultaneously, I know while you were teaching, you were on a spiritual journey. You first with yoga, then with astrology. So talk to me about how
Hmm.
those two trajectories like are part of this time
Yeah.
period where you're in between or
Yeah.
where you know it's not right, but you haven't made the change yet.
Yeah. I think like a big thing coming to mind with the why did you stay? It's like it's a distant memory now. So it is like genuinely difficult to remember to like put myself in the frame of mind, but there's like an ontological difference between the version of me that started teaching, the version of me that left teaching, and the many versions of me since then, and the version of me now. And I think if I could try to put simply why I stayed in my current memory of what it felt like, it was like I didn't feel that I was choosing to stay. I didn't believe that there were other options. Like I had spent my whole life with this identity as a choir teacher. Besides that blip of half of senior year of high school and half of freshman year of college, this was what I was about. And I'd been like kind of working towards this and prioritizing this skill set, this value system, this way of being in community, this way of positioning myself as a teacher, this identity as an educator. Like it was so much of who I was that it was like, I think I just assumed that if something wasn't feeling right about it, the problem must be the school, like the particular job or the institution of education, which like it was
Yeah.
in some ways it was those things. But it's like the thing I'm feeling that I haven't quite articulated, or maybe I have, but that I'm trying to get to that feels central to why I stayed was like I didn't know there was another option. I didn't know. And it wasn't like it became more of a fear of like, what if I let this go? That's what it became when I started to really realize that a change was going to need to happen. When I started to realize this wasn't my future, then there was like a contraction and a fear around like, but what else? But for like half of the time, I would say it wasn't even, I didn't even have that realization. So I didn't even have the fear of, I don't know what comes next. It was just like, this is what you do. But in contrast, I don't know. I'm like struggling to find the word. There was like a lack of vision, but it didn't register as a lack at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Totally, it makes sense. It's you couldn't see it yet. You literally like you just couldn't imagine it yet. You just didn't
Right.
have like the vision yet. And then
Yeah.
once you did have the vision, then it implies action, and that can be scary sometimes,
Yeah.
especially when, as you say, this has been your whole life up to this point. And so talk to me about the development of that vision of what comes after, wherever you want to go in that process. I mean, I'm seeing your spiritual awakening, but I'm also, obviously you started a nonprofit, but like wherever in that period you, like Budway told you, you're still Kelsey if you're not a teacher, a music teacher.
Hmm.
You're opening to this idea, like where do you get that energy to take that next big, I mean, again, as you talk about, it's a gradual process, but where do you get the energy to start to move into a new identity, a different identity?
Hmm. You know, it's interesting to think about vision. I don't think I ever have had a clear vision, which I'm
Mm,
like innocence motivation, like in the moments where I'm the most relaxed and therefore the most capable of being resourced by reality, the way my mind orients to it through sixth color innocence motivation is like there is no clear agenda. I don't have a clear vision. So it's been just rapid trust falls, rapid fool card moments, like jumping off the cliff into the abyss, 2551
hmm
style. And I think, yeah, for me, it was like it was less about this is where I'm going from here and more about like, I absolutely cannot sustain this anymore. So
Hmm.
it became
Choiceless choice.
a choiceless necessity to like move on to something. And yet, what I always found was that the stuff I had been doing, like as my interest, energy for excitement around zeal for one thing started to dwindle, there would always be something kind of growing in the background, but I was innocent. So I was never like
Mm,
consciously like, this is the next thing. But I would find as it was time to take a leap that there was another lily pad in front of me that was the result of where my attention had been shifting to and where energy had been growing for me. And so what that looked like when I left teaching was okay, I have to look at my date map again. So 2 or 3 years into teaching, where I'm like having this kind of existential crisis where my job is draining me and it's not fun anymore. And it's the beginnings of a whole different paradigm coming in. I start practicing yoga. And my yoga practice was like a real anchor for me starting in like 2012, I think. And I don't think I ever was like, I'm going to be a yoga teacher. But yeah, as like music teaching was becoming less the passion and more just like the thing I had to dredge through, sixth house style, yoga, the philosophy of yoga, the practice of yoga, the community around yoga was starting to come into my life. Community around esoteric arts, spiritual arts were starting to come in. And it didn't like, yeah, there was no, I don't think I saw like necessarily a career path in spirituality or in yoga, but there was like enough relationships, excitement, communities to start to fill the void as like music teaching was leaving the central role in my orientation to community and identity and creativity. And yeah, it's like hard to look back and remember exactly how it worked, but I left full-time teaching. I'm trying to remember. I think all I actually did was save $11,000, which is not that much. But I think like in the last year, year and a half that I knew I wasn't going to keep teaching, I got serious about like, all right, let me make sure I'm building some savings. I would have been in my like mid to late 20s at this point. And I think I just like left. I think I just knew I couldn't go back and trusted that I would get a job somewhere, somehow, and had $11,000 to hold me over. But I don't think I had any sense of what that job would be. I hadn't yet made any money, I don't think, in the healing arts. Or maybe I have, I can't remember. I might have like just started to do readings or something. I wasn't teaching yoga yet. Like I was not making any kind of sustainable money in the healing arts, but I felt like kind of this blank vision, but feeling of opportunity in front of me when it came to this realm. But it was entirely a trust fall. And obviously, like my spiritual education and practices up to that point had, what's the word I'm looking for? Like primed me
Mm.
to be able to take that leap. So they were connected in a kind of subtle resourcing way, but not in an obvious, like, we'll go from here to here. Like, I did not know what was going to be next. And what ended up happening was before the summer was over, after my first school year, I just ended up kind of reluctantly applying for a part-time teaching job at Chicago High School for the Arts, which I remember feeling hesitant around and a little bit like icky about because it felt in some ways like going back.
Mm.
But it was like, okay, here's a way that I can rely on the skill set that I have honed and like the degree that I have and like be a little bit responsible conventionally by still playing this role that I've been working towards playing, that I'm qualified to play, that I can prove that I can do and get like some money and some income and some stability from it while also having a lot of space for the new to keep coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a lot of what all my transitions since then have looked like. It's been like I realize this isn't working. There's this immediate somatic divestment from the path that I thought I was on, and then new stuff's coming in, but I can feel that it's leading me to where I need to go, and it's leading me to some sense of resourcedness, whether financial or otherwise, but I don't know how. And then there's this like reluctant, kind of irritated step back where I will, yeah, reluctantly engage with the last thing
Mm.
for now because I can feel the other thing coming. So that's how, yeah, that was the first of this pattern that we'll probably talk through as I keep quitting jobs, how I like reluctantly stay engaged a little bit with the old thing, but in a way that's more spacious that allows the new thing to come in.
Yeah. And I think I just really I appreciate the way you articulate this because I think in some of the ways that I've thought about things in the past, it's like you can't leave the old thing until you know exactly what you're going to do next. Or like you need a vision. You need to know, it needs to make sense to other people or to whatever. But you know, what you reflect back is like, it's not like that. Like the new, like you have to, like the process of letting go of the old and bringing in the new is murky and messy and not clear. And you don't get like some angel coming down to you and being like, just so you know, in 6 months it's going to be fine. Like, just trust this process. Like, you don't get that. You just keep trusting and keep like taking the next right step and keep feeling into like what makes sense for you. And I don't know, I just like really appreciate the way that you've shared that with me because it's helped me understand that like, yeah, like it's just one foot in front of the other. And you're just like keep continuing to evolve and there's no place that you get to. But so as you said, you know, you create all this space. You created space for the new thing to come in. And so talk to me. And again, like, you know, as it is, you know, appearing to you in this moment, talk to me about just how you started to like how that new identity started to appear, how that new identity started to flow through you, like what that looked like for you. Because by the time we get to 2020, you're very comfortable in the identity as a teacher of these esoteric ideas of all this stuff. And so it's like, how does that start to come into your system and like move in?
Yeah. So there's this like there's several phases of the what I'll call like the overlap between employment slash teaching and self-employment slash whatever it is I do
Mm-hmm.
now. But I'll characterize kind of like the big in between phase, even though there's many little chapters in there. It starts with me working part-time at Shy Arts where I'm a contractor instead of an employee. And there's like certain classes I'm doing, but there's also extra things I can take on.
Mm-hmm.
So I can like sub other people's classes. I can do a different amount of voice lessons with the voice kids each quarter. So there's like, I think this is teaching me about being self-employed in a way. And it's
Mm,
teaching me different things about like budgeting and different things about my shifting orientation to exchanging my time and energy for money, which at this point I'm learning human design. Oh, no, that's not true. Human design came after. But at this point, I'm pretty well steeped in astrology.
mm-hmm.
And so the concept of differentiation and getting to know myself a little more and like I'm starting to soften around the edges of my inability to conform to the norm of the workforce.
Yeah.
I'm like seeing through the lens of astrology that I'm cardinal mutable, not very fixed. So now I see that through human design as like I'm non-sacral, I'm a manifestor, I don't sustain things, right? So I'm like having familiar experiences, which are like Miss Tortorice, the choir teacher, familiar experiences of like some of this I really like, some of this fucking drains me, and like having more nuanced awareness of what it is. Because now I've had lots of different opportunities to experience the nuance of what feels good and what doesn't feel good about teaching music. So yeah, it's like these like the overlap of
Mm-hmm.
the flexibility, the different way of thinking about resource, time, energy exchange as a self-employed person, but a similar skill set that I've been using all my life. And yeah, just like a new like Shy Arts was so different than the charter school that I worked in. So it was like, yeah, it was like a pendulum swing in terms of the value systems of the school and like the relationship of kids to teachers and even like it was a music high school, so it really valued music where it was not valued at all. I never felt valued at all in my previous school where everything was about standardized test scores. But yeah, even just like getting to practice, like having a different kind of third line thing to plug into
Mm-hmm.
gave me so much more nuanced information while I'm also like becoming more aware through yoga and Reiki and tarot and astrology and becoming like relaxing more into my uniqueness. So that's like one thing that's happening. And then I'm also becoming more and more engaged communally with people in the Chicago healing arts scene. So I think it was at some point while I still worked at Shy Arts, I think that I started my like 200-hour level teacher training in yoga. And so I'm like gaining, I'm also, okay, defined ego. I'm like seeing how good I am at
Mm-hmm.
teaching yoga, like how quickly I pick it up. And yeah, there was like side note I don't need to put in. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm starting to see my naturalness as a teacher,
Yeah.
period.
And you're seeing your naturalist beyond because like before it was only you could only conceive of it in the music world, and you were starting to see that it extends past that.
Yeah. I can see that like my teacher brain, whether I think
Mm-hmm.
at this point I didn't, I think I knew some of it was kind of natural and instinctive, but I also had been in the classroom for so long and studied teaching. So as I enter like a yoga teacher training program, I'm like watching other people kind of like struggle with certain things or even just like yeah, that's not a natural teacher, you know, and I'm just kind of like seeing that in
Mm-hmm.
myself. Like the second line is becoming aware that, oh, I'm a teacher. Oh, this is natural for me. Oh, I'm skilled at this. And not just natural and skilled at it, but like I've been doing it. Like I'm practiced in it and I'm comfortable identifying as a teacher. And so this is giving me like a kind of accelerated path within the healing arts system
Mm-hmm.
and network, because I think a lot of people come into the healing arts and they have these like epiphanies, and it completely shifts their sense of self and identity, and then there's some kind of like mental black and white thing that comes on that's like, this is what my life's about now. I'm going to be a teacher. I'm going to
Yeah.
teach this, right? Like so many people become yoga teachers when they realize how healing yoga is. And so many people, when they first like integrate astrology, spend a year or two thinking they're going to be an astrologer and then drop
Mm-hmm.
it, you know? And so I'm kind of like wondering if like, I don't know. Yeah, I have these memories of some part of me knowing like, oh, everybody's trying on this hat, but I'm going to keep wearing this hat.
Yeah.
But like just feeling a distinction between the way many people would like follow the learning astrology to doing sessions pipeline, or the practicing yoga to becoming a yoga teacher pipeline. I had this like sense I can look back on that was, I don't know, I'm like insecure about the way it's coming through, but yeah, that version of me just like felt that like I'm the real deal, something like that. And I think it was the
Yeah.
naturalness of teaching and my my prior skill set in teaching and just my affinity for teaching that gave me this sense of confidence that I just saw I was like assimilating new modalities into this, like I was saying before, like I'm also simultaneously becoming more and more aware of who I am and my difference in how I operate. And I'm seeing that this like fad of learning it and then teaching it isn't a fad for me. I'm like, oh, this is me. Like I can, this is
Mm-hmm.
naturally what I do is I learn something, I integrate it, and then I share it. And I share it in a unique way and I share it well.
Yeah, I think it's like putting yourself in this new environment helped just confirm to you what you already knew about yourself. It's not like you're saying, like, these people were trying on a new identity, but this was almost more of an expansion of who you already were. And that's why you felt so comfortable knowing it was going to stick, because
Hmm.
it was like a part of just what you understood about yourself. And then also, yeah, defined ego is very comfortable, owning what they're good at and as they should be.
Yeah. And I think there's like something too to the fear piece of what's lost in that moment I described of like Budway giving me this glimpse of I'm still me, even if I'm not a music teacher, which is like this moment I first started to allow myself to grieve the part. I'm
Mm.
like, I'm even emotional about it now, so many years later, like grieve the part of me that was a music teacher because it was so much of who I was. But in allowing myself to like really grieve that and come to terms with it and let it go, that's what allowed me to be so available to feel into how some parts of that are never going to be gone. And look how they're showing up now in this next evolution of myself. So I think that's also part of what was happening was I was like allowing myself to grieve the life I thought I was going to have and this identity that I thought was fixed in me of the high school music teacher. Like I had a whole idea of like I'm gonna retire, I'm gonna be this like acclaimed music teacher, like
Mhm.
beloved by the school, you know, like I looked at what my experience of choir was like growing up and I thought I was gonna create that for decades of my life, and turns out by year 3 I was like depleted. And yeah, my defined ego, like I know if I want to do it, I'll do it. And so there was something really fucking annoying about the fact that I couldn't do it. Like my body was saying no, the will wasn't there. My mind thought it should be, but the will to keep going and building this like choir empire like
Mhm.
wasn't there. And I think like I grieved it. Like I really grieved that very quickly, very intensely, very honestly once I was capable of doing that, which was years after starting to realize that I needed to. And that I think that there's something about that that like made space for me to stay connected to and like fortify the parts of me that weren't actually going to be lost in this grieving
Mm.
process and were going to be composted into the next thing. So I was like really available to find myself
Mm.
in the spiritual communities and in teaching yoga and in teaching astrology because I was willing to let go of, I was alchemizing, you know, I was composting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like, when I look back on it, so much of it does look like a very smooth transition, but so much of the next like lily pad in front of me, they literally just like formed in front of my feet, like as I was about to
Mm.
take the next step. It was not according to any plan that I could have foreseen or calculated.
Yeah, it was just trust. It was just leaping into the unknown. Very, if I'm thinking of 2551, that channel where you're just initiating into the new thing. And there's so many directions I want to go. I want to appreciate the grief that you shared because I think that's really important for people to understand that even when something is no longer working or it's not aligned with us, there is often a grief process that is a part of letting it go. And I think so many of us really resist those emotions and don't allow ourselves to go through them. But I think it's important for the alchemy. It's important for allowing yourself to go to what comes next. But the other thing I'm curious how you would respond to this. And if nothing sparks for you, that's totally fine. We can move on to another thing. But like when you're at these choice moments constantly throughout with the lily pad, like your next lily pad's in front of you, like what is the like emotional experience for you, like with each step? Like, is it like it's just kind of like, okay, this is what's in front of me, I'm going to this, or is there resistance or is there trust? Like what, like, because I do feel in you a sense of like inner faith of like
Hmm.
yourself and your process, but I'm wondering how much of that was there then, or if that's really conscious in you as you come through these choice moments, these
Yeah.
moments of leaping.
I think that sense of trust has always been there. And I think I think like pre-Saturn return, which is when all of this started for me, when like the career tower moment started, there was like more of a naivety and entitlement.
Mm,
It was like defined ego was like, I'm going to be valued and I'm going to do what I want and I'm going to be good at it.
mm,
Yeah, there was just a sense of trust built on that. This like, I mean, all of that's true, but I had a much more kind of naive and entitled like pre-Saturn return sense of it. I was just like, it's gonna work out because I deserve it to work out. So like I didn't anticipate how hard it would be.
mm,
So having this tower moment pre-Saturn return, I think was in some ways a advantage.
mm-hmm,
Because now, like post Saturn return, now I'm like in my opening Saturn square, like I'm a lot more hardened now, is one way to say it, but also discerning. I'm a lot more aware of the struggle that is necessary to actually be the authority in your life. But pre-Saturn return, when I first left teaching, there was more of this like Jupiterian, just naive sense of like trust. Like it'll work out because it has to, because I deserve it to, because I'm gonna have a good life, period. And now I feel like I'm a little more hardened, like I said, but I also like the unconscious has become more conscious. So that like the seed of trust, I've just become more and more aware of it. And I've like my muscle memory around leaps of faith and trust is greater. Like I'm just I consciously trust it more now. So
mm,
even as the kind of like naivety, optimism, pre-Saturn return version of me has died, there's been this simultaneous thing happening where my like sense, my spiritual trust, which has always been there, is like brought more and more to the surface. So I can like yeah, like I mean, like human design has been such a useful tool in this, right? Where I can, Nick used the phrase the other day on quality time, vetting the mind. I really
mm,
like that phrase. Like, I know what my not self mind sounds like. I know what my manifestor impatience, my transferred desire, narration, all my undefined, like I know what that sounds like. And that's where lack of trust shows up is through those voices. So those narratives, those fears are still there. They're no less there than they ever were. And in some ways, they're more there because post Saturn return, I am more discerning. I am less naive. I understand how much hard work it takes
right.
to have a peaceful life, one way of saying it. But I'm also more aware. I'm also more like practiced in distinguishing between this like distorted version of I don't know, yeah, I don't know what word to put in there. Yeah, I'm just like more aware of my mind. And so I'm not able to, I don't self-sabotage myself as much. So yeah, the trust is always, I think like, yeah, what was coming up for me today and how do I meet these moments is like, there's always been resistance, there's always been fear, there's always been trust. And the way that I like the gradients of how those things are informing me has mutated through my process, but also like my awareness and being able to see clearly all these parts of me that are working together to move me through the shedding and the growing and the evolving. I can like see it more clearly now, and in seeing it more clearly, it's easier to trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I keep thinking about you pre-Saturn return, and I think that, you know, we need a little bit of, and I mean this more of in a psychological sense, not a human design sense, it's ego inflation to take big risks in life. You have to like sometimes you need that extra energy to pull you forward, especially when you're like connection with your subconscious and things like that aren't as strong. So I can kind of see that in that story. And I think there is like there's a truth in that. Like you need a little naivete sometimes because if you understood what you were getting into, you would turn around, you know,
Hmm.
like and you know, you need to not know. And I think that's what I think about a lot when I'm thinking about my own path is like there's a reason I didn't know what was coming next because if I did, I wouldn't do those things. And then I wouldn't
100%.
get to the point a year later where I'm like, wow, I'm so glad I did that. You know,
Yeah.
like for like a classic example would be ayahuasca. Like if I knew what that experience was going to be like in the 3 months after that, I'd be like, no, thank you. I'm
Yeah.
not going. But I needed that to be in the place that I
Hmm.
am now. And I think
Yeah.
it's the same thing with you here. It's like, yes, like you were leaving a certain safety and you needed that like inflation of confidence just to take a leap into something that like was less secure. Like, you know, like you were removing yourself from a safer path and you were encountering different challenges.
Hmm.
And that was part of your spiritual growth. So you can get to this place where you're not relying on ego inflation. You're relying on this
Mm.
deep sense of your trust in
Oh,
yourself.
that's so well put. Thank you for that summary. Yes. It was like ego inflation was a necessary ingredient, and now I don't have to rely on it. But which is so helpful actually, because ego inflation still shows up now, and I don't trust it anymore because I can see it for what it is, but I don't need to trust it now because now I have this other thing serving me, which is like actually maturized trust,
Right.
which I did not have when I needed to rely on the ego inflation.
I mean, the past, like, you know, so many years, you've been putting that through the fire, you know, like you've
Hmm.
been constantly testing the metal of that trust. And so coming back to our timeline-ish, you
Hmm.
know, you, as you say, like you start to see yourself as a teacher in other realms,
Yeah.
get involved with the spiritual community because that's filling you more than the, you know, music teaching community and the school community.
Yes. I start working at Moksha, the yoga center that I had started practicing at. I forgot about this part earlier, but I started like work trade, front desk.
Mm-hmm.
And then one summer, so funny to think about this now through the human design mechanics retrospectively. One summer off teaching, I think I was still full time teaching at this point. I just emailed the work trade manager and I was just like, I want to like work here over the summer. Got anything? Like I just like initiated that uninvited
Oh my
and the
God,
answer was
love.
like yes. So I got a paid job over the summer and then the work trade manager who hired me and the assistant manager who started as I started were two of the three co-founders that I then later, like 2 years later, maybe co-founded Inner Sense Healing Arts with. So like I just knew I wanted to like do more at this yoga studio and find a different way of making money. And like probably some part of me knew that it could lead to opportunity, but like I didn't have any clear sense of that. And like going from a, you know, degree employed music teacher to getting paid hourly to work the desk at a yoga studio is like that's not a lateral
Right.
career move, you know? So it wasn't like it wasn't giving me a sense of security, but it was giving me a sense of like filling a void, moving somewhere, something. I started my teacher training at that studio, and then there was this like mass exodus from that studio due to a lot of just kind of fucked up behavior on the part of the owner. And the manager that hired me, the assistant manager, who's like one of my besties now still, and my favorite yoga teacher from that studio and me ended up co-founding a healing arts center, which started as like after all these people left, there was this like what are we going to do in place of it? It was like 12 or 15 people at first kind of starting to meet and conceive and vision. And within a few months, it was down to five of us. Actually, there's a fifth person who left later, but a group of five of us that co-founded this thing that like ended up making huge waves in the Chicago healing arts space. Started as like a yoga thing, but because of what I was interested in at the
Hmm.
time, I brought tarot into it. I brought astrology into it, and like, yeah, there was like no promise ever of being resourced from that, but I just kept doing it. And eventually I was resourced from it. In our last couple of years of operations, me and the person who originally was my assistant manager at the yoga studio were like the co-directors of a nonprofit, and I was making like 30K a year from that. But also because of my involvement there, I had a place to immediately start teaching yoga. I had a
Hmm.
place to immediately start doing like astrology workshops, and getting astrology clients. Pause there because you probably could pick out certain
Yeah. And I
components
think
of
like
that.
again, it's just like step by step. And you didn't, as you said, like this is very, I mean, innocence motivation. I see a lot in that too. You're just like,
Hmm.
okay, like let's see, let's get together, let's just go. But that community gave you the opportunity to do the work that you were doing, and you got to see the impact that you were having and kind of trust more in that identity as a teacher of these modalities. And as you say, like eventually it led to being resourced, not in the same way as you had been previously, but still resourced in this work. And so, from me listening to this, I'm like, I mean, besides the money piece, but like, like what an ideal scenario. You've got this amazing community. You're kind of like a leader in the healing arts. You have this, like I'm, I'm, I'm like, what was the problem?
Right.
Like what was, what was
Literally, the only problem, almost exclusively the only real problem, the only fucking wrench in my side, I think I'm making that phrase up, is money.
Yeah.
Like there's no besides with it. Like it's that.
Yeah.
Like Saturn in my second house, that has
Yeah.
been like when I think about what would I be doing if I didn't have to make money, it's like almost identical to what I'm doing, but just in a more relaxed way with a little bit less hustle and structure because every so often I have to make sure I have a way to make money come in. I would be having, I mean, in my mind, I would be having way greater impact and doing way cooler things and
Yeah.
helping way more people if I didn't have to figure out how to pay the bills. So yeah, and I mean there have been other things like you and I have talked a lot about like fifth line trauma. There have definitely been significant moments of challenge and alchemy around being misunderstood,
Hmm.
imposter syndrome type of stuff, and belonging stuff, like
Yeah.
which I think is fifth line stuff, I think is manifestor stuff, like I'm never invited. I always feel on the outside of my 11th houses. Like, I don't feel like I never felt like the astrology community accepted me, whatever that means. Like, I realized that that's in my mind, but it
Right.
also, because it was in my mind, it was also in my reality. I got like violently villainized by some people in the human design community about as soon as I stepped into it. So I've always felt there's that Aquarius Leo thing I was talking about with Aquarius. I've always felt like outside.
Mm.
And so I've like had to deal with a lot of that. And, people say, I imagine you've heard this before, that like going into spiritual entrepreneurship is like an acceleration path on the shadow work path because you can't blame it on, like, I couldn't, this was a big, okay, sorry, multiple thoughts at once. You can't blame it on your job
Yeah.
anymore. And this was a big part of me leaving teaching too, is like, first it was, this charter school sucks. And then
Yeah.
it was the institution of education. And then it was the fucking workforce, like it's
Mm-mm.
capitalism. And like there's truth in each of these. My power view is like literally seeing the power dynamics and the fucked up shit of all of this and enter human design, which I didn't start studying human design or like have my initial shattering or attunement human design until like late 2020, I think. And so at this point, I'm not involved in any school. I've already like started Inner Sense. I think I'm being employed by I'm like far along on the Inner Sense trajectory at this point. And now I'm like seeing with more clarity than ever how alongside the institutional issues and the problems at each of these workplaces, there were also always going to be non-negotiable aspects of my nature that made me not fit for roles like this.
Mm.
And that was not an awareness that I had, at least not like precisely in the times I was actually leaving these teaching roles. Okay, that felt really relevant when I started it.
Yeah, no, I think that is really helpful in contextualizing things. You know, what I'm hearing and what you're sharing is like when you become a spiritual entrepreneur, you, as you say, like it's an awakening because you have no one to blame for what's going wrong. And of course you can if you want to
Oh, you
create
find
that. You
things. Yeah,
find
you
things
find.
and then you see that in a new lens. But as you say, like I mean in the education system, the institutions are not great and it's very obvious and you can be like this is why this isn't working. But as you say, when you move to Inner Sense, you've built this community and you have agency in that community. You're co-director. And at the same time, it's not sustaining you in the way that you want it to sustain you. And you're doing the work, but it's not quite working. And then you eventually move into being a solo spiritual service provider, under your own name. But you're not really alone because, as you say, you're in these communities. And as a manifestor with this closed aura, and you have a very powerful energy, like not everyone's responding to it in the way that you want or you would intend. And then it's creating this mirror effect where you have to confront your differentiation, the fact that you are not like, what you have been societally expected to be. And like
Mhm.
having to untangle that is what I'm kind of hearing from
Totally.
you. It's like untangling like, oh, I actually like to be myself is to lose relatability
Yep.
with others.
Yeah, and it's that was also beautifully spoken. And it's reminding me of when I mentioned leaving my full-time charter school job and going into Shy Arts and being like, it was a totally different setting for me to see some of the same things, which allowed me to see them more honestly. Kind
Hmm.
of like how I teach about how projectors, you have to plug into someone and then
Yeah.
unplug and plug into someone. And it's through that that you can understand what's constant
Yeah.
in yourself. It was like that, right? And I also have all projected channels. So there is in my seventh house stuff that I talked about earlier, like
Hmm.
there's a significant component of my life that is also about understanding myself through understanding who I'm plugged into in this particular context and then out and then in. So there was that I articulated in the teaching thing. And then in self entrepreneurship, there's this thing that you and I have both described here of like there's no one left to blame, but now it's like this rapid succession of oh I found someone to blame, oh I found someone to blame, but it's like you're either going to double down on your narratives about shit that absolve you from any self-responsibility or
Yeah.
blame, or you're going to quickly be like, oh shit, that's my pattern. Oh fuck. It's like that wherever you go, there you are thing, right? And
Yeah.
so quickly, in addition to having the resource of these beautiful technologies of astrology and human design to help me actually digest this experience of plugging in, unplugging all these like different experimental way like yeah, it's like the combination of all this third lining I was doing and all these different scenarios and then having mindfulness meditation practices, Reiki. I haven't talked too much about Reiki, but I'm sure there was a lot of like energetic attunement that happened for that on a less conscious level that was also priming me
Mm.
for all of this like really intense shadow work and spiritual awareness and like mental shattering. Yeah, and then I'm also like I have these languages. I have these like languages to help me vet my mind, to help me understand what I'm actually experiencing. Yeah.
Yeah, you have like yeah, you have like that's what's been holding you is these languages, is these tools that you have. Like again, like you're confronting your shadows, but you're not without tools. You're not without things to
Yeah, there's
support
like
you.
as the way of sense making that was each of these like paradigms that I'm
Hmm.
shedding leaves me, I have these different ways of sense making that are they're putting a ground underneath my feet, not in the way that my mind or conventional understandings of like responsibility and security tell me I should have, but they are giving me a ground to walk on, which, you know,
Hmm.
as a Sag rising and a Sag moon, the ground of like this makes spiritual sense
Yeah.
has clearly has higher value in my system than like I can pay off my debt and pay my bills next month. So I think like there's a certain level of just being aware that that's the deal I'm making. Like that's the choice I'm making, whether that's a mental choice or like a soul incarnate choice. Having the maps of astrology and human design to help me see and calibrate to the value systems of me helps me feel like it's okay for me to put more stakes in my spiritual evolution than in my bank.
Yeah.
You know, and that might not be the case for everyone, but not everybody's a Sag moon and rising with a Pisces North node.
And this again speaks to differentiation. This is about you like being yourself and trusting in that because that isn't everyone's path. But as I'm similar to you in the sense that I needed a meaning, I needed a reason. Like it grounds me to have that, to have a spiritual framework for my life. I've created a very personalized one, but without that, I'm like, what are we even doing? Like, what's the point
Mhm.
of anything if I don't have that spiritual reason? But I want to, and so like you're building that. And in 2021, you leave Inner Sense and you kind of go out on your own and you're a one-on-one service provider of astrology and services like that. And
I'm also teaching a lot, but
you're
like
teaching a
by
lot
myself without like a
without like a
collective.
collective to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you're always a teacher. And so you're kind of doing these things and now you're kind of taking that further leap out. And I think one of the things I think I've been thinking about as we've been telling this story, because it's such a contrast to everything before, is like you've up until this point always had a community of some kind.
Hmm.
And then you decide because like and being a part of Venus Fan, like that was a community. Like I so associate with you community, but there's also this point in your life it seemed like where you had to go on your own.
Yeah.
And I'm curious like what that transition was like
Yeah.
and what that yeah.
That I think earlier when, on the call when I was like, "Oh, this is such a potent moment for me to be reflecting on some of this stuff," is because this moment that you've pinpointed here, where I left Inner Sense and like officially was out on my own, having my I refer to it as my Justin Timberlake era solo artist, leaving in sync. That's like closing now,
Yeah.
actually. Like in this last season, I've really re-embraced community, but and this is like live integration happening right now that I'm not even available to speak to, but like there's like this thing happening right now where I feel like I've finally surrendered to the way that I show up in community uniquely and the way that community my relationship to community and community's relationship to me. There was like this long solo period was kind of like a detox period, a
Mm,
hermit period, right? We're coming out of a
right.
hermit year. I deconditioned to my hermit body. Like I needed to distill down to my home frequency. And then there was a certain point. So I would say that lasted about 4 years, this like very concentrated hermit mode in which like what preceded me leaving Inner Sense was the pandemic.
Mm,
And it went from this like such a sweet little beautiful storefront that we like finally opened after 2 years of visioning Inner Sense and like doing pop-ups and really intentionally building like a community value system healing arts collective thing. We finally opened it in October of 2018. I wasn't getting paid yet at that point. But it was my whole life. It was like a dream come true. It was like I remember at one point feeling like I was teaching. It was in my early years of teaching. I read a book called Manchester Bidwell that like made me envision this community center that I would like run.
mm,
There's this like multimodal, amazing space for people to do all the things that I now do. But I would like pictured it happening in my 50s or 60s. And then I like found myself starting it and like so quickly, so young, pre-Saturn return. It's like truly like life goals were happening for me. And then COVID happened and we went online. And before we knew what was going to happen, one of the co-founders moved just from Chicago to Gary, Indiana, which is just like an hour away. But something about them moving made me feel like, what am I doing? Like staying here. Like I didn't like it gave
Mm,
me this feeling of like, I don't want to be held down by this. And then Budway at that point was on a pause from teaching and was gigging full time. And that just stopped. Like he was doing like wedding
r-
gigs and stuff, and that
right.
just stopped. And I can't remember exactly like this. We're both innocence motivation, so there's never really a clear reason, but it just like became clear in our bodies that we were gonna take the pandemic as an opportunity to leave Chicago because both of us had been ready to get out of Chicago for a while. And in a sense, now I could like maintain the dream but leave because it was all online. And so, anyways, that's extra details. What I was trying to say is what preceded my Justin Timberlake era was in the fall of 2020, I moved to Las Vegas with Budway without much of a plan, but knowing that I could continue to do Inner Sense, which in this era at least was online, and continue to do my like individual work that was like not officially under the Inner Sense umbrella, but being resourced by that. And in Vegas, where I live now, where I'm also planning to leave soon, so I'm at the end of this chapter here of hermitude, I my relocated chart is Scorpio rising, where I'm actually a Sag rising, and I live 3 degrees away from my Pluto line. So it's been like for people who speak astrology and know a little bit about astrocartography, like I moved here, I initiated myself unknowingly into an era of like really intensely like running towards the fire of shadow work.
Right.
I went from being an extremely social person, not sacral, constantly making myself available for all of these communities and relationships that I'd collected in my 13 years of Chicago, my DePaul community, my Vandercook community, my music education in the city community, my first school community, my second school's community, the yoga people. These like I had like so many people in relationships that I valued so much and I was so burnt out and I remember there being a moment in Chicago where I was like this is all pre-human design. I was realizing the problem was me and not just the institution of education and the
Hmm.
jobs. And I remember having this like visceral clarity in a moment that was like, I am not going to rewire myself from these burnout tendencies in the same place that I gained
Mm,
them all. I remember having this moment of like, it's going to take a location reset for me to detox all of this burnout shit, which within a year of having that clarity, mental clarity, I have found human design and had like 2 years of really fucking intense deconditioning all about the sacral. And it all made so much sense in
yeah.
the aftermath. But there was a part of me that knew in that moment that like I don't know when enough is enough and I need to physically remove myself in order to know. And so this is all like preceding when I leave Inner Sense, that's like at a climactic moment of now I'm a couple years into deconditioning via human design. All my co-founders are generators,
Mm,
are non-emotional generators. I'm a manifestor. I'm like really coming to terms with my lack of capacity. I'm looking retrospectively at how much of my initiatory energy got Inner Sense off its feet, off the ground, got it going. I'm looking at like my defined ego. I was looking at my fifth line manifestorness and seeing like that I seduced so many people into like the magic of this space. And I never ever felt like that it was all me. I never felt like that. Like it was such a group like a beautiful demonstration of like magical collaboration and every single one of us that co-founded it and all of the people that were part of that community were a huge factor in like what made it what it was, which even though it doesn't still exist, I like have so much pride in the impact that it made and I saw how it changed people's orientations to
hmm
exchange and community and healing arts. like there are practices that we started that people in and outside of Chicago are still doing to this day that I never saw before Inner Sense. So in many ways, a quote success, even though conventionally not a success at all. But like leaving it was the first time I like really confronted my my uniqueness. So okay, I was saying I never mean to take credit for all of it, but as I was coming more to terms with the role that I do play as
Hmm.
initiator and my closed aura and my inability to sustain to respond to compromise in a certain way, I was trying to voice these things to my co-founders and like in a couple cases, a couple significant cases was meeting a lot of resistance. Like there was not a they were not able to reflect back to me the awareness that I had in their own system. And I specified that they were all non-emotional sacrals because I would feel like I'd like ridden all these waves and come to this deep clarity and I would be expressing that and there were times where like it was just met as I was in some kind of emotional
Mm.
fight mode or flight mode. And I was like learning about emotional authority and trusting my
Yeah.
process and trusting what I knew in that moment, even though it looked emotional because it was emotional, because it was another huge loss for me to leave Inner Sense, like it was to leave music teaching. But it just became like I tried to help them understand. I tried to renegotiate my role, my vision for where I thought it could go. And it just like it wasn't going to happen. And so it came to the point where I was just like trusting my inability to bend from the vision that I'm
Mhm.
holding, trusting my lack of capacity to keep going, and trusting the value that I bring as an initiator alone. And I wasn't like, that was no longer a team in a setting where I could operate in what I now knew to be my somatic integrity. And so I left. And like, I still have some, like, I wouldn't say regret because of how I operate in all the ways we've talked, but I still look back, like, I have bitterness about this. It closed months after I left. And so
Mm.
I have bitterness about that because I had a vision for its next
Right.
iteration and the others just weren't on board with it, which I experienced then and still experience now to a point as like a lack of value in me
Hmm.
and trust in me. And sorry, I'm like there's so many cycles that are like makes this stuff really significant for me right now that it's like
Yeah.
very fruitful for me and what I'm processing and alchemizing now to talk about it, but it's making I'm getting lost in my process with it and losing sight of the trajectory that you've offered.
But I know where what I asked, and
Okay.
so you just go where you need to go, and then I'll come back
Yeah.
when it feels right.
It's like this like solo era for me, I think has been a lot about self-fortification.
Hmm.
And then it got to a point somewhat recently where I kind of like that year I left choir where I'm like, no, I need this. I need community. But now I have a way of returning to community that still feels scary because it's right at the edge of my comfort zone. But I have like the things I've been doing up to this point have built a lily pad path in front of me.
Yeah.
And like when I think on that in this moment, I'm thinking about like you and I'm thinking
Hmm.
about other people that have shown back up at this point for me who have engaged with my work in some way during this solo era. Like I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure coming into contact with you was like pretty much right.
It was like like deep into it. Like yeah, like I'm with 2023,
2022.
20 late
Okay.
2022.
Yeah. So
2023.
very, yeah, you found me at the beginning of my Justin,
I started
beginning-ish.
following you before that, but we didn't engage
Yeah.
until then.
So like people who have found me in this solo era, there's like a level of not everybody, but there's a level of like recognition that I feel from some people who I have been connected with in this era that you met me when I stopped self-betraying. You met me when
Hmm.
I started having the audacity to live as myself, and you're still here, or you've come back, or you continue to value me and my perspective. So there's like a safety that I feel in that,
Hmm.
that as I like reinitiate community in a way that is scary to me because it looks really different than what I understood I'm supposed to do and act and believe in the context of community and like being a team player. Yeah, all this to say, like, I wasn't intentionally doing that. I wasn't like trying to build a crew of people that would enable me to be me in community. But that's like looking back, I can see that that is one of the things that has happened in this last
Yeah.
era is like I grew the nervous system capacity to be more honest with myself as I understood who I am. And in growing my own nervous system capacity for that, I've gained more and more relational opportunities to actually have my true value reflected back to me, which
Right.
6 years ago was something that I had a huge lack in. People valued me then for my not self. People valued me then for my
Mm,
ability to not know when enough is enough,
right.
right? For to overthink things and figure out the plan. And like so much of what I brought to Inner Sense was like too muchness of head ajna and
Mm,
sacral,
yeah.
right? My South Node in Virgo shit.
South Node in Virgo.
And so now I've been on this, and Inner Sense started during Virgo Pisces
Oh yeah.
eclipses 9 years ago, and now they're happening, and I'm jumping back into community, which there's so much here, but it's very having astrology and having these contexts to be able to look back at the patterns and see how these moments of somatic trust that I had all these leaps of faith, all these initiations into the void, jumping off the cliff, like I can see how they made sense. I can see how they led me here. And that additionally gives me the strength and the trust to keep doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's the thing is like you build the trust over time. You can see yourself going back, and that gives you the strength to take that next leap, that next scary thing. I just want to reflect because I heard a lot in you talking about the ending of Inner Sense, and like there's this, you know, as you said, like you had this moment in Chicago where you realized like this isn't working. I'm burnt out, but I can't fix it here. And then and like even though you were physically in the desert, that was Chicago, and like they knew you as something different. They couldn't. It's
Mm,
hard to change in front. Like it's when it, especially when like a group is established, there are roles.
yeah.
This is who you are. This is what we expect. Like the group demands that often,
Yeah.
and it's like you were changing, and they're like, well, the group is this what this is. This is what this is, and so you had to let go of that. But the pain of that, I could feel,
Yeah.
and so like I think the thing that I'm feeling into a little bit, and I'd be curious. I mean, there's a lot of other things I wanted to talk about, but just right now, based on what you shared, I'm feeling into this. Like you said, like you feel some fear about stepping into community again.
Hmm.
And like pre-Saturn return, you like that isn't like there were fears, but I don't think like you had like I don't know if community had that same thing. It was more just like you were like living, you were not as conscious maybe of like what you were
There was a
doing.
blissful
Blissful,
like
yeah.
naivety, blissful ignorance to things like the teeth of the projection fields.
Right. So, like, and you've had these harsh lessons in the projection field, but just talk to me about, like, in this version of you, how you're working with that fear
Hmm.
and trusting that, because I mean, you're a 3740, like, community is built into your DNA. And what I love about working with you is not only the way you teach and the way you articulate these concepts and your deep knowledge of them, but it's also the people you attract. Do you bring communities that are really enriching? Like I couldn't even begin to think about how you do that. Like it's like so foreign to me.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you have that ability to do that, that you can bring these people together. It's so part of your DNA from my view. But at the same time, as you say, like it's heavy. There's a
Hmm.
heaviness or a scaredness that comes with it. And like, how are you engaging with that now?
Yeah.
If that feels generative to talk
No,
about.
it feels generative. It feels extremely relevant. So just hats off to you on identifying it. I don't feel confident in this moment of like what's happening and how to
Yeah.
articulate it. So there's like a little bit of fear and vulnerability there, but even more than that, there's just like I don't know that what I'm saying like I don't know if there's going to be much universal truth
You're not at
substance to
that
it.
point. Yeah.
Personally, I feel like it's fruitful and helpful for me to think about and talk about, but I think for myself, it feels helpful to make this distinction that like now I'm sharing from a place of this is raw and I'm in it, not from a place of like, I'm a teacher and I have this information to share. So
Hmm.
for me and anyone else, I'm sure it's more relevant for me than anyone else, but it's helpful for me to just say that. So I've been thinking a lot lately about power view, which I have, and personal distraction. And like Ra says, our distraction is like the dumb version of it. So we can't actually see the distraction thing.
Mm.
So I've been like really wanting to understand what in my thought process is personal distraction. And I wonder if I ever will be able to because our distracted view is just like messy. Like we can't actually see it. So that might be a dead end. I'm not sure. But I think there's something to, I'm very attuned to power dynamics.
Mm.
And I can see when I look at the way that I now understand, which is still kind of hazy when I try to articulate it via the mind and words, but feels very clear in my body. When I look at the way that it feels right for me to be in a communal context, I see the power dynamics of that. I see like the power that I hold
Mm.
when there's community built around something having to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've had a lot of resistance to it doesn't feel safe to position myself as like a glue for
Mm.
community. And I'm sure there's personal distraction here. That's what I'm just like like I know that it's like I for me power view innocence I should I'm designed to like see power dynamics and then relate to them in a very unattached way.
Mm-hmm.
But I transfer into like desire, like I get hooked into a particular potential outcome with this personal distraction that's like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but there's something to like, what does it mean about me? What are people going to think about me if
Mm.
I have this power?
Right.
And like, I've gotten so much feedback, like you just shared, about the value of the people that come into orbit with me. And I see that. And there in the past I've had bitterness about that because I've been like, oh, I'm not being accepted by the astrology community. I'm not being accepted. I'm not being celebrated by these
Mm.
communities of which I am an ally and a part of. But like my work is fruitful to so many people, not only in the impact that my particular transmission makes, but in the networks that come out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past, I felt bitter about that. And so, in a more surrendered place where I'm able to look at it all as mechanics
Yeah.
and not so personally, like maybe that's part of why that phrase resonates with me so much. It's not personal, it's mechanics, is because personal is a distraction for me. Anyways, when I can look more from the outside of like, I can see why. Like I have the 10.4 in my design.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in all individual plus judgment and community. So I like really see this sense of I'm here to like discern, assess, judge, and correct how we operate communally in a way that allows for people's true individuality to come through. Like I see so clearly, these systems have helped me feel more precisely in my body how I'm designed to operate in community. But then there's a lot of mental fog. There has been a lot of mental fog and resistance for fear of being misunderstood, for fear of like I think at this point I know I'm not power hungry. Like I know any power that I accumulate, I
Mm-hmm.
trust myself to use
Right.
in integrity. I trust my I don't know if I think I always did to some extent, but I don't trust other people's perspectives of that. And I care so much about equity and about autonomy that I have
Mm.
these fears that I'm going to squash other people's autonomy. But what I've realized over the years is it's not because I want to. And I like really trust that. But that's why I like teach self-sovereignty, I think, so much. In some ways, I think I teach it as a protection for myself because I want to
Mm-hmm.
empower people to trust themselves because I want to be able to surrender to, yeah, community comes into orbit around what I teach.
Mm.
Like that's not even necessarily a thing I'm trying to do. It's just what happens.
Right.
And because I need money, I'm gonna
Right.
let that resource me. But then there's these power dynamics in that, and I'm afraid of other people like treating me like a cult leader, whether as pedestalizing it or villainizing it. Or a big thing that's been coming through is like being afraid of other people's jealousy.
Mm.
Because a lot of people, I think, and I don't know if this is true, but I think it's true. You tell me from the outside. I think this is kind of similar to what I was saying about my naturalness and transitioning into teaching the spiritual arts.
Yeah.
It's like if there's like a picture of what it means to like make it in this
Yeah.
industry, and that picture is no one's actual differentiated path, but it kind of looks, I think, maybe close to mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I do think I'm designed to very impactfully, powerfully, motorized throatly like teach this stuff
Yeah.
in a very unique way that has an impact. that is single definition, so it like doesn't really rely that much on other people. Like I'm gonna do my own thing. I'm
Yeah.
not gonna compromise to you. And people for whom it resonates are gonna get on the Kelsey train and they're gonna find each other and they're gonna be part of it, but not part of it in the way I am. And so I'm like, I have a lot of resistance to that because of all the things it could look like. And I have a lot of fear of being misunderstood in that. I have fear of other people giving their power away to me,
Hmm.
which is never feels good. I don't
Yeah.
want that. So yeah, that's how I'm orienting to it right now is I'm like I'm experimenting again, less apologetically, with more care than ever, but with less hyperfixation and control than ever on like, yeah, I'm gonna embrace the what seems to be non-negotiable constant truths about me, which is that I teach and it resonates with people and community builds around that. And it's funny because sometimes when I hear myself voice some of these insecurities, I get these glimpses of what it might sound like to other people.
Hmm.
And there's these like moments where I like realize how much it's in my head.
Mm.
And a lot of those moments are like when I'm people like you, like Mel, like Noah, like Caitlin, people I've in the orbit field that I've been interfacing with more lately. There's this like relaxedness and like obviousness with which you reflect back to me my work and my impact. And I think there's some second line stuff in that too, right? Like I
Right.
need you guys to show me that
To
I'm
pull
doing
you
this,
out.
that you wouldn't do this. That Tolan's journey as a spiritual entrepreneur practitioner, it's not this. And
No.
that's so helpful for me because it helps me see the value in it and relax into it. But there's still like all my own mental shit, all my own fear of crucifixion, all my own like South Node Virgo and the 10th stuff is really here. And yeah, this like period in the desert of hibernation was super necessary in this self-fortifying way. And without it, I don't imagine that I would be able to show up with the confidence and relaxedness that I do have, even though there's other things here too, in like taking these next leaps of faith that I'm taking. But at the same time as every other transition I've talked about, it's like all the stuff I've been doing up to this point during this Justin Timberlake era has, without me intentionally meaning for it to, has like resourced me with the exact right people, the
Hmm.
exact right circumstances,
Hmm.
the exact right conditions to try the next thing.
I really appreciate you sharing that and bringing us into your process because I think it's important to
Yep.
understand what this is like, to take these leaps and what it brings up. I mean, obviously, I think the lens with which I'm listening to you is as a fellow fifth line, there is so much, there's just so much sensitivity for me, and I know for you about how things are perceived and what people are saying. And I've had my fifth line experience with you where I had ideas about what you were, and we had to negotiate and go through that and understanding like the truth of it. But that's the beautiful part of it is if you're in the process, if you have the awareness, you can get to that point. And I think
Mhm.
the reason I'm bringing that up is because, and I'm realizing this as I'm saying it, is that just like these things are negotiable. People will probably project a lot of these things, but you've negotiated that in the past, and you will be able to in the future. I mean, there's just no doubt in my mind about that. But I also think there is like I don't know. This is also coming up for me. It may not resonate with you. I don't know why this is making me think of you grieving the identity as a teacher. I'm like, what if when you step into this role and own who you are, what are you
Hell
losing?
yeah, that's very on point.
What are
Like
you losing?
I'm losing, yeah, the part of me that feels safe in not leading in the way that I lead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm losing a I'm like wanting to borrow words from something you texted me a month ago. I'm not going to find the right words, but just know that there's a phrase that you use that's really informing how I'm thinking right now. I'm losing the illusion of dependency on others to validate my goodness.
Mm, yeah. I think that's what the alone time gave you is that you didn't need to let go of I need to be working all the time and thinking all the time to prove that get that goodness reflected back to me and then
Mhm.
you're in yourself and I encountered you after that process, or, deep in that process where you were being yourself and we connected and we built community from that place.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the next evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like we're all addicted to receiving external validation from our outer world, and we have so many habituated patterns and compulsions based on that. It's kind of like I was messily trying to articulate earlier when you were like, why were you staying? And I was
Mm.
like, I didn't know there was another way. Like, we don't know there's another way outside of this guilt, coercion, compulsive based, habituated seeking external validation. We don't know it until we start to feel it and until something comes in and really challenges that like calcified way of understanding reality and being codependent with reality and with those we're in relationship with. And like now I've seen some shit I can't unsee. Like we were talking about the PhD in self-responsibility that is
Yeah.
entrepreneurship. Like now I see that it is up to me to trust in my inherent goodness. And now that I see that, it's like I can still act compulsively. I can and I will still act compulsively sometimes according to this addiction where like I need someone
Yeah.
in my external reality to validate me, and like that's also just part of life and that's
Yeah. And that's
okay.
like human. Like we
Right.
do need
We do
that
need
to
each
a certain
other.
extent.
That is part of my findings in this 5 years of hermitude, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But like now I can move through that. Now it's interdependence and not codependency. Now I can move through the relational web and I can, with honesty with myself and intentionality within myself, I can trust that I'm currently seeking an outside perspective to help me reattune to myself. And that is like so different than compulsively self-betraying
Yeah.
to avoid these misunderstandings or these negative opinions of others that with my undefined ajna at the top of my not self hierarchy like
Right.
really fucking throw me. So that was a very helpful question. Thank you. I'm losing my ability to rely on others' perception of me to validate my goodness. And I do really feel like able to do that. Like I feel I was watching a bunch of I had a recent first time hyperfixation on the Chinese zodiac in the last few days. And I was watching this video about the snake, which I'm a year of the
Yeah.
snake in the next year. And there was so much that was like so on point about how there was going to be like, there was something like platforming my expertise. Like we're talking about this podcast network, and I'm like, word for word, that's what I'm going to do in this next chapter. And then there was like, when someone's rising, so when someone's starting to really shine, someone else is squinting. And this like, theme
Hmm.
of like there are going to be people who are envious, both
Yeah.
outside looking in, projecting things, and inside
Yeah.
wishing that they like their own resistance to what the role they're playing and what they're moving through is going to manifest as this like jealousy that they had the
Hmm.
role I had, right? And the my power stuff sees that. So all of that to say, I feel like very fortified in this moment of like the direction I'm moving in and how all of this stuff leading, all the shadow work I've done up to this point has prepared me to be able to potentially stand in that fire and take up even more space and
Hmm.
surrender even more to the way that I organically differentiatedly lead, and to resist less than ever the like natural and like you said non-negotiable inevitable repercussions of that. I feel like I'm going to be able to move through that. And like
Yeah.
5 years ago, I was nowhere near ready for that.
You just got to follow the next lily pad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel complete. Do you feel complete?
Yes, very.
But I just want to thank you so much for this conversation. Like, just obviously, you just have so much awareness in the way you articulate your process. Like, it's just so like I just love the honesty and the truthfulness and just like the way that you weave those stories and the weave your experience. Like, I think just people are going to get a lot out of it. And so I just really thank you for your vulnerability and honesty in this. And it's been a delight.
Yeah, thank you. This was like, I'm going to listen back to this and it's gonna be like a witnessing session worth thousands of dollars. It was so helpful. Like your ability, I really trusted your ability to find the parts that mattered. And every time I finally stopped talking and heard what came through you was just, there was like such crystal clear, precise, on point awareness. So thank you for guiding me and for
I mean, one thing I want to say is I really felt your trust in my guidance, and it
Mm,
was really interesting, like how different it felt when I could really feel like you were trusting that. So
hmm.
it's interesting.
I'm gonna ask you questions about that later.
Yeah. All right. Let's stop
Cool.
recording.
Thanks.